Om Sahana. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saviryam Karvo Vahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvesho Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us, and may Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings, and may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. We welcome our small group, our Sangha here tonight, and we also welcome our live stream audience to our Satsang. We've just completed our Arati and sang the beautiful Arati hymn, Devi Dukkha Harini Tarini. It is she who removes all suffering and reveals the truth to the devotees, the goddess, the mother of wisdom. She's also the purveyor, the proprietress of that wisdom particle that we've been talking about in our live stream classes over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Knowing her, beings are saved from samsara, from the illusion of birth and death and ignorance. And so as we come together tonight for this evening satsang, and the koki frogs are beginning to recite their mantras, which they will continue doing all night. Here on the big island of Hawaii, we settle into that hour just at dusk and thereafter, where we call the hour of God, and perform our ritual, settle our minds down, center ourselves in the spirit. Of course, that should probably be happening every hour of every day. And take special note of the boons and blessings that we're privy to here in spiritual life. As we were just talking about before the live stream audience joined us, spiritual life is very rare. It's very rare to have attraction to the spiritual path and the graces of a illumined guru, and a desire to learn the spiritual teachings, the Dharma, the wisdom tradition, and to practice it is probably even rarer. It is to actually do sadhana, which is the Sanskrit word, is even a rarer thing. So those elements are found in the spiritually awakened person. The spiritually illumined person is, of course, a whole another matter. We look to those for the highest teachings and for examples of realization. And we go to those beings and their disciples, like the servants of the servants, as we call them, dasa dasa. And we go there to get our matters clarified, that is, our issues and our concerns elucidated, so that we can destroy this ignorance and this doubt and this fear that plagues the mind in all 3 states of our consciousness, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. It is there, so that we can pierce through that curtain of nescience, or that cloud of unknowing, as it's called, and know the truth and be set free and live a dharmic life, even a divine life, what Christ called eternal life, which is missing from everyday conventional life. So we go to these great beings to get some clarification, and that clarification is driven by Atma Vichara, the desire to know the nature of reality. So the questions that have come in today for our satsang are around the nature of reality. I've just was handed them a few minutes before we began tonight, and so I had a chance just to look them over briefly, and I see that much of it has to do with consciousness. So let's take these one by one. There are 4 of them. Probably will fill our hour of God quite nicely in hearing the discussion about these questions that have come in from our viewers and from our local Sangha as well. We'll take a short one first. Since there is only one consciousness, is it possible for one to perceive one's own sentiency flowing back from nature? There's another question that goes with this too, that should probably be stated. Maybe I can take them both at once. I understand that nature is insentient, and only human consciousness is sentient. What is the difference between consciousness and sentiency? Well, ultimately, there is no difference. We use one as a description for the nature of Brahman consciousness, and we use the word sentiency as a sort of designator that describes the ever-awake state, the always aware state of consciousness. That is, as compared to the brooding and somnolence of nature, the constant repetition of nature, the decay that's going on in nature all the time. In fact, even in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna tells us, and actually warns us, that we should be aware of the evil that accompanies nature. He actually uses the word kilbisha, which is a kind of a Sanskrit word for evil. So if you associate just with nature, then there's a kind of evil that's lurking there that causes you to identify with physical things which, according to Lord Buddha, go through these constant transformations, these billows. Things are always billowing forth, you see, and the billows don't have any substance. It's like clouds, they evaporate and then they form again, and that becomes the nature of one's existence. Rather samsaric, to borrow the phrase from Sanskrit. So if you notice in your study of nature that everything is going through the 6 transformations, birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death, or you could put it much more simply, is that it's just rising, existing for a few moments in time, and then falling again, and then coming back again in cycles, then you begin to know the difference between what is create and what is acreate, or what is sentient and what is insentient. And that causes the first glimmerings of that wonderful quality in the spiritual aspirant called vairagya, that is detachment. You begin to detach from objects and from things and from nature. It doesn't have really anything, or shouldn't have anything to do with aversion. It's just really the nature of nature is to be insentient and to go through these changes all the time. But if you examine in comparison your soul, you put the two side by side, Purusha, they used to call it in the old terms, and Prakriti, then you'll see that the soul has very distinct qualities, even short of pure sentiency. That is, before you can actually see yourself, as they say, or realize your true self, to become illumined and enlightened and know the witness consciousness within yourself, then there are a whole series of qualities and attributes that are present in the human mind and intelligence that are completely different than what nature possesses as characteristics. It's obvious. It should be obvious. So if people get a little bit too sensitive about nature because they're nature lovers or they're conservationists or so forth, that's actually a little different area to talk in. But when you're talking about examining the nature of consciousness as to the nature of something that's insentient, then there's no contest, as they say. You'll find all these wonderful and inspiring, brilliant qualities in the human being. Of course, the human being has to make use of them. And in fact, what to speak of nature which we usually think of as plants and 5 elements and forests and rivers and so forth. There's also insects and plants and animals, and they don't have these wonderful qualities that the human being has. Not to that extent, and also not developed, if they're there at all. So that's the difference between, you could say, prana, a life force that's flowing through everything, and consciousness. That would sort of distill your search a little bit more. That is, if man does not live by bread alone, as Christ told us, then there's an energy that's different than just that energy that's found in things. Kinetic energy, electric energy. In fact, we were just chanting a beautiful chant, Na tatra surya bhati na chandra tarakam nema vidyuto bhanti kuto yamagnihi tvameva bantu manabhati sarvam tasya basa sarvamidam vibhati. Bhati is light. So the idea is there within the indivisible self that occupies all beings in a pervasive form, in an all-pervasive form. The sun does not shine there, nor does the moon, na tatra surya bhati, na chandra tarakam. Surya and Chandra are sun and moon. Nema vidyuto bhanti kuto yamagnihi. It's not in lightning, and it's not in fire, agni. Tvameva bantu manabhati sarvam. That one light shining, all else is made to shine. See? By that one light, all is made radiant. May that radiant enter into us. That is, it's already within us, but basically we have to bring it out. Like you'd say, oil and sesame seed. You would never know, maybe there was oil, nutritious oil there. So you're going to have to go through a lot of effort, aren't you? You're going to have to find sesame seed in abundance, grow it, whatever, gather it, harvest it, invent a press, and then press enough of them so that you get a few drops. Mm-hmm. It's quite a process, and that's how they say you find out the gold, you see, in human consciousness, by removing the dross. And so, in that same way, you'll find out by examining each level of consciousness that there is a great insentiency in things solid and material. And if you take that from objects to the energy in objects, if you can examine them. And remember, we're not saying that you take the object apart and just look at its constituents, because you'll just find atomic particles eventually. And they themselves are quite absorbing to look at, their vibration and so forth. But you're being drawn deeper and deeper out by looking at the particle. What we want you to do in spiritual life is to begin to take your consciousness, focus it, like a candle in a windless place, and when you focus it on the energy in things, and then you focus it on your own thoughts, and then you focus it on your intelligence, and then you focus it on your ego, that is, your sense of separate self, you're stepping up to principles that are more and more sentient. They have more and more light. Because na tatra surya bhati na chandra tarakam, that one light that is in everything, what you're seeing in the moon and in the sun and in lightning and in fire, is a sort of a distant glare. It's just a glimmer. Like at class, I think we were talking a few weeks ago about the man who prayed to the Lord as he was passing from the body, please take the sun out of the sky for me, remove it so I can see the real light that's behind it. So with all the power of the sun to shed light, this soul sitting there in his own sentiency had realized that the sun in the sky was just in a fixed position for hundreds and thousands of years. And it was just going on flaming. You see, fire was its only possession, the power to burn. So compared to that, he looked at himself, or he looked at other subtler lights, the light of intelligence, for instance, as we've been studying every Sunday for the last 5 Sundays. Actually, we're always studying the light of intelligence. That's Jnanam. And if it's put on the self, it's called Atma Jnanam. That is the Atman, the study of the wisdom that has to do with revelation of the Atman within you. That's coming to the most sentient of all principles. So, difference between sentiency and consciousness, only by way of words, designation. Essentially no difference. We're talking about pure sentiency, pure consciousness. Sometimes we call it pure awareness. And these are the best English words that we use. We could use higher perception or supreme intelligence, those kinds of, we start to put 2 words together, and then we have other more powerful designators to try and explain the nature of the inexplicable, as far as words will tell. Is it possible to perceive one's own sentiency flowing back from nature then? So it's good we took these 2 questions together, because many people, as I say, have a very deep relationship with nature. I'd say probably we all do. And one of the faults that is found in today's world is that people have alienated themselves from nature. The indigenous cultures, for instance, are telling us, they said, because the Western society and the materialistic societies have separated themselves from nature, that's why they're going through all these problems and troubles. See, we have to reconnect with nature, because nature has something primal in it that we need. It really has life force in it, and life force is that prana, we call it, or chi or mana. It is that missing element in Western thinking right now that would keep you from jumping from physics to deity worship. The understanding of the difference between science and religion, the bridge, to try and bridge the gap there, you're going to have to know something about the prana. And healers and some mystics and some shamans and so forth, they've made prana sort of the area of study for themselves, focused upon that and gained some higher understanding about it. And really it's has a lot to do with filling in this gap between one's disconnect with nature. So sentiency and insentiency is a higher study, though, you might say. Once you see that prana is operative, that man does not live by bread alone, then you begin to gain an interest in things subtle. Until then, you're still on the outer periphery of things. So you might have to get a teaching like this, for instance, which is just a capped-off cylinder. We use this to teach the children about the difference between sentiency and insentiency, or how nature and soul, spirit and nature, if you want to call it that, don't really mix. They only seem to. So you have some oil and you have some colored oil and you have some water here. So basically we ask the kids, does oil and water mix? And they say, oh yes, Babaji, it certainly does. See? And so I say, well, just sit and meditate for 45 seconds, because any good scientist, whether it's a physician or metaphysician or spiritual scientist, yogi, that is, or any good psychologist, Western or Eastern psychologist, will have to make observations, and the observations are going to take time, and that time that you're observing has to bring your concentration in. That is, when you focus on something, that's when you see its characteristics. And in fact, gets a little bit to that question, can we see sentiency flowing back from nature? Yes, that's actually what we're seeing. We're seeing our own sentiency. It's not there in nature, it's reflecting off of nature and coming back at us, like looking in a mirror. So this is why we must reconnect with nature, but I must caution people, like the Buddha did. This is why Buddha and Christ and other great beings were so precious to us, because they were beings that went beyond nature. They went beyond form. Nature could not form them. They only borrowed bodies from nature, made of 5 elements, and then they abandoned them but their consciousness never changed as they did that. So you see 45 seconds later, or it could be 45 years later, it could be 45 centuries later, whatever the case may be, somebody will finally understand. How about 45 lifetimes later? This doesn't seem to be that many in the long efflux of time. Somebody will understand that, I should have really only been associating with nature. I should never have identified with it, because I can never mix with it. I can never be matter, and matter can never be me. It can never be the real I. The real I is consciousness absolute, Sat Chidananda. It's pure sentiency, and nature does not have that characteristic. It's cycling all the time, and because I've identified with my body, then or I am identifying with a series of births and bodies, then I tend to think myself as being a materialistic person or a materially-oriented being, or I am matter. It's a materialistic viewpoint. So a person who studies consciousness will begin to divorce from that standpoint, will begin to rise above that old way of thinking and begin to see himself as pure sentiency, or the witness. The witness has seen the process happen, you see. He's the one that's looking on, seeing the difference between soul and nature, between creature and creator, between man and spirit, between soul and nature, as my teacher used to say. And once knowing that, one will know that there is no real other difference, that the nature is just an extension of the soul. That's a deeper teaching. Basically, when you separate yourself out from nature and you see that you're pure sentiency, then you can look back at nature and see it all reflecting your own consciousness. But you have to know yourself first, and you have to separate yourself from nature in order to know that, which is why they went into the wilderness, or they went to the mountain, or they sat under the bo tree for so long, so they could really get this absolutely crystal clear about the difference between consciousness and nature, or sentiency and insentiency. Once they had that clear, then nature did not prove a danger to them anymore. It did not prove an overt attraction, and it did not prove an problem of attachment for them. Then they could end their series of lifetimes and live in one consciousness all the time. Whether they took a body or not then was up to their choice. It wasn't all of a sudden being born in the mother's womb and not knowing who you are and living for 80 or 100 years, not knowing your true nature and dying again in ignorance, and then coming forth again in that same ignorance. It's what they call samsara. So that's a word for that very supreme separation in yoga. In Sanskrit is called kaivalya. It's a very precious word. It's almost synonymous with full enlightenment. But it's that movement, that very subtle movement that the soul makes just before it gets full enlightenment. And it means that it looks out upon everything that has to do with form. It could be from the cosmic mind on down in one system. It could be from unmanifested prakriti all the way down to the 5 elements in another system. It could be from the deep sleep down to the waking state sleep and through all the dream realms. It could be from the Trinity, the realm of the Trinity, all the way down through the gods and goddesses, through the ancestors, and right on down to the realm of the humans, animals, and insects. However that understanding takes place, that very subtle movement that takes place just before enlightenment is, I see I never was a form. I'm a nameless and formless reality. I'm a supreme eternal verity. And I sit in one position and watch evolution march forth by the hundreds and thousands of years in cycles, in yugas, in manvantaras. That has to do with this question here. On Sunday, near the end of your lesson, you spoke of the theory of evolution. You said scientists say humans evolved from monkeys. Then you continue to say that this was false, as humans were created in the image of God. I'm assuming that you know the actual theory of evolution states that humans and monkeys both evolved from a common ancestor. And not that monkeys came before humans. That's a good point and possible. So I will pose my question under that assumption. Is it possible for the human species to have evolved as the scientists say, and that it is actually the soul that was created in the image of God? Perhaps it wasn't until humans had evolved to this state that then a soul could enter the body. If the soul is something that is separate from the body, couldn't we allow it to be true that the human body was created through the evolutionary process, but the soul has always existed in its present form? I am not attached to the theory of evolution, but it is something I have come to accept based on the evidence on Earth. Can you expand on what you know of evolution and its place in SRB's teachings? Well, of course, my area of expertise isn't science and evolution, it's spirituality, particularly through the Vedanta. So it's possible that I could misspeak myself from time to time in that area. But there's one thing I'm pretty clear about when I give the teachings, that, and it's put pretty well here in this idea that the soul was created in the image of God, number one. And that the human species has evolved. So this is where in Vedanta we have to talk at two, maybe three different levels. If we talk at the non-dualistic level, then we're declaring that evolution is rather dreamlike. It's rather like a myth. It's a passage of time, and time is illusory. So in that sense, we could not say that the soul was ever created. It's acreate, as Swami Vivekananda said. It's not something that had a beginning and then had a middle and then have an end, or it's not something that comes from dust and then from birth to death and goes to death afterwards. That's pretty much the body as we know. The idea of a soul as body then is a problem that we must get over. The idea, the next level of it though, that the soul is a transmigrating mind, because that was put in here too, is that over time the soul evolved. What you're talking about there is a soul which is the mental complex, made of four things. Dual mind, that is a mind that's judging pro and con and good and bad and life and death. It's always brooding about dualities. Number two, one's thoughts, citta. Number three, one's intelligence. And number four, one's sense of separateness, that is one's ego, sense of separate self. That's called the fourfold mind, or the antaha karana in Vedanta. The antaha karana means inner, antar, karana, cause. So they're telling us that the mind is the internal cause of everything that's external. Number one, it tells you that God is not a creator, that Vedanta doesn't believe in creation out of nothing. You can't get something out of nothing. I even have one of my physicist friends has a t-shirt that says, "Nothing doesn't exist." And whether or not that's understood on the level of atoms and neutrons and quarks and particles and so forth, that's one level of it, that everything just is regenerated back in nature, cyclic. But then you could understand it on a higher level, that is on the level of eternal truth or spiritual life or spirituality, that the soul is unborn. So when Christ said you're cut in the image of God, he's talking not so much that you were created out of something or out of nothing, which doesn't make sense, but that you are a spark off of the fire of that consciousness. That's even a sloka that is in the Upanishads, talks about all beings as sparks off the fire of consciousness, and in each spark there's that ability, that fire to burn. So this is all talking at the second level, qualified non-dualism. The first level is Advaita or non-dualism, which is, there's just one homogeneous mass of pure conscious awareness, and ideas like evolution and projectionism and birth and growth like the soul growing or things like that, are not acceptable. Once one rises to that level and realizes the truth, then one stays at that level and sees everything taking place on the periphery. It's much like the ocean watching its own waves form from the depths. If there is a great, if the ocean was the ocean of consciousness, then yes, it's possible for forms to rise and fall. Paramecium, salamander, monkey, ape, man, they all rise and fall off of this surface of the ocean of consciousness. The rising and falling is so infinite, so varied, so multivariate, that nobody can keep track of it. Who can count the amount of waves in even a square mile of ocean that rise and fall inside of a few seconds? It's impossible to keep track of it. So in that sense, this is the Maya. This is the constant conjuring up of names in form, in time and space, based on causation. But in the depths of that ocean, there's just one homogeneous mass. You see, it's just one consciousness with no divisions, and no waves are forming. And so in the depths, there's just peace, peace, peace. Shanti, shanti, shanti. It's at the surface that all of this movement is going on. So with those kinds of analogies about metaphors about the ocean, and metaphors like Christ used, you're cut in the image of God, we understand it at the Advaitic level to mean that there's just one homogeneous mass, pure conscious awareness. And it's sentient, and supremely sentient, and it's supremely aware, and it's all consciousness. Sarvosmi. It's a nice one-word mantra, Sarvosmi, everything is. So everything is, from even nature all the way back to the soul. So the spiritual aspirant can make a subdivision, and should make a subdivision between the sentient and the insentient, right? But once they do that, and they know themselves to be the sentient principle, then they can look back on all of creation, that is, all of what appears to be being created and preserving and destroying itself all the time in cycles, and can say that all that too is one reality. That is just an extension or a manifestation of Brahman. It's all one consciousness. It's just sporting at different levels. The farther out it goes, then the more dense and the more gross becomes the vibration. And therefore, you find yourself in a physical earth, see, with your thoughts have become solidified. Objects are just mind made concretized. See? But this is, of course, your doing. You and 7 or 8 billion other people, 7 or 8 billion other souls you see on earth, or billions and billions of souls in the ancestor realm. And that leads actually to the next question, because one woman gave this question: how should we work on our ancestral threads and our relationship to the gods and goddesses on our path to enlightened intelligence? Referring back to the last question about human evolution and so forth, we have this assumption that we're growing. We have this assumption that we're moving on. So when you say the path to enlightened intelligence is a journey that one is taking in a sort of non-actual sense. It's a dreamlike journey. That is, we are that pure conscious awareness from the non-dual state, sense of things. You see the truth, the reality of it. We've separated ourselves out conveniently by using an ego, our intelligence, our mind and our thoughts, that fourfold process. And then from there, the senses and the elements were projected out of our intelligence and our thoughts. Objects are just thoughts made concretized, as Holy Mother used to say. So with all that process in front of us, they've described it in terms of 24 cosmic principles and levels of consciousness and awareness, the states of one's awareness and so forth, then we can see that it has all happened in an eternal moment, and it's continuing to happen always in that eternal moment. That is, it's being projected, sustained, and withdrawn in the eternal moment. So it's an apparent triple movement that's going on. It's not actual. You only come to notice to know this when you become still and watch the process go on outside yourself. From inside, you're always enlightened intelligence. So the path to our enlightened intelligence probably should begin with acknowledging that there is no path. There's just enlightened intelligence, or pure consciousness. And that the path is something that we're projecting. It's our own projection. We can actually end the journey right now if we want. Problem with that is no one wants to. They like to dream. Consciousness likes to dream. And so it will go on dreaming and conjuring up and projecting, using mind and Maya. Maya will provide everything for you. Maya is almost synonymous with nature. It'll provide everything for you to mix it up, mix your consciousness up with nature. And then it's going to naturally separate itself after 45 seconds or 45 lifetimes, as we said. But in the meantime, there's all this suffering that's going on due to the misapprehension of what happened. That I took my own enlightened intelligence and I mixed it with nature. And maybe that wasn't that wise. Or maybe I should have done it in pure consciousness. I shouldn't have done it in dream consciousness. I shouldn't have tried to dream myself other than what I am. There are two nice long Sanskrit words in Tantra about that. Swarupanyatman bhava means running away from your true self all the time. Running away from your essence, swarupa, swarupanyata bhava. And then swarupa pratishta, being steady in your essence. So beings who are steady in their essence and then project themselves into the realms of the ancestors, the realms of the gods and goddesses, the realms of the human beings, and the realms of the enlightened rishis. They can do that consciously, you see, so there's no problem for them. They can immediately give up whatever they assume, because it is an assumption. They know it's an assumption on the part of a steady, ever-illumined, always aware, pure consciousness, which is their very nature. The hound of heaven is after you, is how that was described in the Christian tradition. The hound of heaven means your true nature is looking for you all the time, but you're finding very convenient ways of getting away from it. So when the teachers, the gurus, find this out, then they know not to strew pearls before swine. They know how to read a person who is really ready to awaken. And when that person's ready to awaken, they'll attract them and say, "You want to wake up, don't you?" "Yes, yes, I want to wake up." And the teachings will be given, and hopefully within that very lifetime, immediately they will awaken, and they'll join the company of the saints and seers and sages and saviors. And this would be the best way to work on your ancestral thread, or your thread to the gods and goddesses. Thread is a good word you used here. Sutra, basically, or sutratma. It means a subtle thread that's running through everything, through the tapestry of everything. And if we can find that and trace it, then we'll know we are the whole tapestry. There's a beautiful song in India that says, "Oh mind, you're just a huge black bumblebee buzzing around the flowers in a tapestry." So you're mistaking these yarn flowers for the real articles, and you keep bumping up against them and trying to get nectar from them. So, turn instead to the original. Turn away from the fake, from the non-authentic, from the apparent, from the non-actual, from the dream, and turn to the real essence within you. Swarupa Pratishta. Then remain in your essence always and never venture forth again. It's sort of like an octopus that can send 8 arms out. A great illumined rishi can actually project without leaving. You know what I'm saying? The arms can feel about. The arms of a great Mahatma can feel what's going on in the realm of the gods and goddesses, and in the realm of the ancestors, and in the realm of the intelligent, in the realm of the humans, without ever moving from his place of enlightenment. He might even throw a body or two down there, you see. So what you're looking at when you look at a Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, or a Swami Vivekananda, or a Ramana Maharshi, or a Jesus, or a Buddha, or a Muhammad, or a Moses, is you're looking at basically the extension of a great consciousness that's sitting somewhere in its own essence, never moving, never a word escaped me, never tricked, you see, never tricked into mistaking the body for the true self, or mistaking nature for spirit. Never falls into that delusion. And therefore, when that body goes away, the body of a Christ or the body of a Buddha and so forth, body of a Ramakrishna, then you're just seeing the octopus retract its arm back in. It felt what was going on in that world enough. So I know I'm talking a lot around your question, but I'm actually really talking from within the essence of the question too, is that's the best way to work on your threads, your sutratmas, your sutras. The sutras are also slokas in the scriptures. So by studying them, you're really studying yourself. People pick up a book of scriptures, they go, I think I want to learn about myself. But as they're reading and as they're connecting with the sutras and the wisdom in the sutras, that is the self, reading about the self and understanding the self. And it's all happening with no apparent movement going on, isn't it? It's like if you turn the books of pages of a book, Vivekananda said, the soul is studying nature. It's like the soul studying nature. It just watches every page go by and puts the book down. It just refreshed itself with what was in nature. But it was always in the soul. The soul didn't move. And so it picks up the book of nature, refreshes itself, and with the knowledge there, what's there, whatever it is, I shall know what it is, and then it puts it down, and it never moved. So this is the Advaitic way to work on the threads that are existing between you and every other level of consciousness. The Trinity, the rishis and sages and saints, the gods and goddesses, the ancestors and siddhis. Siddhi means a kind of like a ghost-like being, like just barely above the human level. Not siddhi can mean perfection, but it can also mean these beings that are not even as high as the celestials, the siddhas. And then on down to the elementals and so forth, to the human beings, and even realms that fall below the human consciousness. Patalas, sunken grounds, they're called. All of that is in consciousness, but consciousness is all-pervasive. And you are that consciousness that's all-pervasive. So this is the Advaitic way to work on it. You just sit and you repeat what I just said. You think about what I just said. You read the non-dual scriptures from a standpoint of, I am reading myself. This is me reading about me in a book, written by me, on me. See? The great I. Otherwise, if that doesn't make sense to you yet, or if that's not an option right now, then you have to do some spiritual practices, which is always good to keep the mind free and clear anyway. Basically, you want to do your meditations every day because that keeps the mind aware, ideally, that you are formless. See? I mean, this is a bit dualistic, isn't it? The soul mixing with nature and so forth. But the one holding it and looking at it, the witness, is completely non-dualistic. Is seeing all of it happen from a stationary position. So your meditation, the best thing for meditation, the best thing about meditation is to remind yourself that you're formless. And that's why you shut down the senses and transcend the mind and shut off the thoughts. What else would it be for? To create a void inside of yourself? You should avoid the void, because consciousness is full. Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamadachite. It's all full. Purna. So meditation, it would be probably the next step down from just pure on Advaitic realization. Oh, I guess I better go meditate to remind myself that I'm a formless entity, a nameless, formless verity, an eternal truth, a consciousness with a capital C. Then, if you want to work on a thread that's not quite that profound and magnificent, then you would come down to the level of study, informing your intelligence by scriptures and so forth, and doing devotions at the altar. And then, though it's probably not all that advisable, or it's fraught with a lot of distractions and dangers, there's the path of karma yoga, which everyone's doing. And however, it's a very powerful path if you can do it right. It will have the same effect as the other four yogas will have, because you'll have an experience in karma yoga where all action will stop. You'll be the witness of every action you're doing. Some of my students and other people have said that they could even be riding a bike marathon, and all of a sudden, toward the middle or end of the marathon, they have the feeling that they're breathing hard and they're pumping hard, their heart's beating, and they're pedaling their bicycle. The whole landscape will just sort of stop, and everything will stop. And they'll be at the center of this great activity that's going on all around them. And they'll have the feeling that everything just slowed down and stopped. And have a very profound moment in the midst of action of what meditation shows you about inaction. So, if you talk about the threads to your ancestors and to your gods and goddesses, that would be a way, a fourfold way, the four yogas of making those connections. You have to engage in them, though. And then, at the top of the heap, you might say, is this great Advaitic realization that you inform yourself of every day. Basically, that's what you see when you see these great beings, free of fear and free of brooding, free of any concern for themselves or their body, because deep back inside of them is their true self, and they've never left that. They're always identified with that. Keep themselves identified with consciousness, and are very careful about how they engage in meditation, in study, in devotions, and in action. Very careful about that. It's sadhana, and sadhana is secondary at best. It is the best way for aspiring beings to remember that they're cut in the image of God. But once it's accomplished, then you know yourself, then sadhana becomes not necessary. You only do it for maybe two reasons at that point: to be an example to others, and to keep the mirror of the mind wiped clean, so that it can always see reality everywhere. Even in nature, even in the insentient, it can see reality as the backdrop, the substratum, the underlying foundation of everything. Sarvosmi, everything is. And that's, of course, an ultimate level of consciousness to live in. the final thing I can say in the minutes we have remaining about that nice question is that the threads of your consciousness, levels of your consciousness can be studied through cosmology, because when one's talking about mankind looking up to the angels, or say to the ancestors, and then the ancestors looking up means inward, by the way, to the celestials, and the celestials looking inward further to the gods and goddesses, and the gods and goddesses, interestingly enough, looking into man as an illumined soul. The rishi, the sage, the seer, the yogi, are higher than the gods and goddesses in our tradition, because the gods and goddesses are fixed in their station for hundreds and thousands of years. They can't move out of that position of being gods, overlords of souls. But man, in my tradition, has the ability to transcend all of those in a swoop and realize his true nature. That's how it's taught in the Indian traditions. So in that way then, working on the threads, your connections, thread is a nice word there, the connections that, like a trail of breadcrumbs, connecting the dots that are going inside of you, kingdom of heaven is within you, then the gods and goddesses would be looking further inward to a higher station of consciousness where those rishis and sages keep their subtle bodies so that they can interact with humans and other beings. Some of this sometimes it's called the three worlds, sometimes it's called the seven levels of lokas, realms, and so forth. And in each loka there's hundreds and thousands of worlds, just like in this one physical loka there's hundreds and thousands of planets. So in the same way, as you go inward, even more so, you see the variegated nature of Maya, until such a level you reach where Mahamaya herself comes to you. I mean, because who else would the saints and sages and seers be looking up to if it weren't for the mother of the universes, the mother of wisdom? Beautiful song in India sings basically, in deepest, darkest, densest darkness, the yogi meditates in a silent, distant, remote mountain cave. Because there, in that densest darkness, O Mother, thy sparkling consciousness is more pronounced. So he would go into the mountain cave. He wouldn't just sit and shut his senses down, because even with my eyes closed, I can see some light getting in, you see. So I want everything absolutely black, completely dark. Kali, Kali, Kali black, see. So that when she appears, her appearance as scintillating awareness will be emphasized to the nth degree, that they will not mistake that light. That's the light of pure intelligence. So if a person is working on the threads by degrees, and one can't just jump from here to the mother, because another song sings, great saints and seers and yogis hardly ever see her, even in their deepest meditations. So that's how secret she is, how humble. When she appears on earth, says Sri Sharda Devi, then it's Lajja Patta Vritti Nicham Sharda Jnana Daike Papebhyo Shadaraksha Kripamai Namostute. Basically, O wisdom mother in modest veil, release thy children from all trials and travails. Sprinkle in their hearts arid a drop of love to enjoy peace. So it's all about this modest, retiring, very secret mother of the universe. Hard to find, yet in everything, you see, most obvious, at least in her manifestations. So, therefore, you're looking up, O questioner, in at least 5 different akashas to 5 different levels of existence inside of your own overall consciousness. And I would say becoming aware of these threads, because when you say the word thread here, I think 2 things. I think sutra, the thread of wisdom, and I think nadi, the thread of energy that carries subtle energy. Nadis, nerves. Not physical nerves just, that carry energy here so that I can move my arm. And when they're pinched, I get atrophied and I can't move it anymore. That's just an energy that's physical and it has to do with physical nerves. But the nadis are subtle nerves that carry souls, that carry thought, that carry intelligence, that carry a flow of prana that's psychic prana and goes deeper and deeper than psychic prana to a more towards pure intelligence. So in that way, those threads that you're looking to, how is it put here, work on, actually probably better, or put it this way, you really work on them when you perceive them. You don't actually work to make the network connected. It already is connected. It's a great, huge spiritual network of highways, freeways, of which what we see in cities and so forth is just an outer representation of just a network of highways and cars and people going along. This inner network like that, and these nadis, hundreds and thousands of them connecting to the chakras in the body, are carrying cars, vehicles too. It's a big car festival going on in there. But inside of those cars, which are pranic bubbles, or which are mental bubbles or intellectual bubbles, are carrying essential parts of the soul to their destinations. Some unbeknownst, others fully aware, and some somewhere in between, see, at all different levels of consciousness. So go out, get in your car and drive to the realm of the gods and goddesses, or to the realm of the rishis, your living teacher, whoever it is. Know that to work on these subtle threads that are connecting everything really is to acknowledge that they're there. And the lack of that acknowledgement is what we're seeing in a physical, materialistic world, who depends only on science, conventional religion, and conventional life, and never knows this great mystery within, that the seers are elated about. They want you to share. They want you to share in it. Oh, when will I dance in company with Jesus, Moses, Buddha, Gauranga? See, when will I be so fortunate as to be able to dance with them? So, my final point about this beautiful question that was sent in about the threads. It reminds me of nadis and sutras. Subtle nerves carrying powerful intelligence and consciousness and spirituality, and sutras, you see, that connect it all together, the wisdom that's in them. So thank you for writing in your questions tonight and for joining us for satsang here on Tuesday night at SRV Ashram in Honoka'a, Hawaii, on the Big Island. And now with the Kokis still saying their mantra, Prakrit, 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 because that's what they love, nature. We will retire into meditation and deep sleep, and our mantra should be Purusha, Purusha, the sentient soul, the ever-sentient soul, pure consciousness, pure awareness, timeless, deathless. So he'll end here with a quick chant. Om Sato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Joytir Gamoya Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamaya Abira Maiti Rudrayate Dakshina Mukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.